Finding someone that understands you is hard because you're human, and there's a lot of different humans out there. eHarmony helps you find someone you can be yourself with. You think no one would understand mourning a plant like it's a loved one, or singing made-up songs to your dog, but that's the type of person eHarmony helps you find. Someone who makes you feel seen, heard, and understood. Get started today on eHarmony. Get who gets you.
You're listening to the Health Coach Collective podcast, episode 119. You need to know about fructose. Today, we're going to go over something that could be harming your brain and body and hindering your ability to live disease-free 10 or 20 years from now. We'll go over what fructose is, why it matters to you, and how it affects your ability to create more life in your years and more years in your life. Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Hello, my friend, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here with me today. How is your energy management? Were you able to see how managing your energy rather than your time makes hard things feel a little bit easier? Today, we're going to talk about fructose by starting with Andre the Giant. Do you remember him? I was pretty little in the 80s, and as a little girl who played with My Little Ponies and grew up with one sister, an English teacher for a dad, and a second grade teacher for a mom, I wasn't exposed to any WWF wrestling as a child. My boys and I listened to an awesome Stuff You Should Know live show podcast episode about a year ago or so. Josh and Chuck were the first and only for a couple of years podcast I ever listened to. Love them so much. Anyhow, in that episode, they talk about Andre's rise to fame in the pro wrestling world and that he was the highest paid athlete in the world for a while there and the second most recognized athlete in the world after Muhammad Ali. I think this was very late 70s, early 80s. I wouldn't have recognized either of them back then. Andre was born in France and grew up on a French farm. He had acromegaly, a condition where your pituitary gland releases too much growth hormone. He was huge, as you know, wearing shoes 3 shoe sizes larger than Shaq's shoes, and apparently his wrist was 1 foot in diameter. I think he got up to 600 pounds at some point. He had some funny wrestling names along the way in Japan and Europe before he got started wrestling in the US, like the Monster Eiffel Tower. That's a weird one. Have you ever done one of those wrestling name generators? I just did one just now and put in my first and last names, and it gave me back the name Eve Hole Punch Watson. What? So back to the Monster Eiffel Tower. From all accounts, he was a genuinely nice guy, a loyal friend, very respectful of women, and kind of generally sensitive, which is sort of sweet. And he was a great wrestler, meaning he could fake the moves and make them look very real. He was genuinely strong, but he could make it look like he was doing monstrous things to people without actually hurting them. He was instrumental in Hulk Hogan's rise to stardom, kind of a passing of the torch. For whatever reason, I did recognize and know Hulk Hogan as a kid, so maybe it was just a timing issue. Hulk Hogan rose at the end of Andre's career, and that was later. Of course, the only reason I ever knew who Andre the Giant was because of the greatest movie of all time. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned The Princess Bride on the podcast before, but I don't remember when or why. Andre was reportedly very proud of that movie and would carry a copy of it on VHS with him at all times and trick people into watching it with him on an almost daily basis. So funny. In addition to his legendary size, reportedly 7'4", although some people question that, he was legendary for his drinking. Hulk Hogan, who was apparently 6'7", I didn't know that, said he once saw Andre drink 102 beers in 45 minutes. Carrie Elwes, aka Farm Boy, or Pierre Despereaux, if you watched Psych, said Andre would mix a variety of liquors into a 40-ounce pitcher and drink several pitchers full in a single sitting. Wrestler Mike Graham said he saw Andre drink 156 beers in one session, which would be a world record, but there was no official documentation. What in the world does this have to do with today's topic of fructose? Do you remember from episode 115 what your coolest and most unloved organ is? In case you missed that one, it's your liver. Your liver does amazing things for you, and there's an epidemic of liver dysfunction in our modern world. Not good. Drinking like Andre the Giant would be bad. Well, drinking like him would kill you. But drinking alcohol is bad for your liver. Drinking excessive alcohol is really bad for your liver, and being an alcoholic will eventually ruin your liver with cirrhosis. Our liver keeps us safe by detoxing all kinds of things and preventing them from hurting us. Our liver has a pathway that uses enzymes like alcohol dehydrogenase, cytochrome P450, 2E1, and catalase to oxidize alcohol to acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde is very toxic, so it's then broken down to acetate, which eventually is broken down into water and carbon dioxide. It's pretty amazing, really. But when you give the liver too big of quantities to be able to process, it causes problems, like fatty liver deposits and liver scarring called cirrhosis. Cirrhosis is an eventual death sentence unless you can get a liver transplant. So if you want to be able to live more years in good health, you definitely don't want to overdo it with alcohol. No Andre the Giant doses of alcohol, or anything that any sane human would consider excessive. One reason for this is because while the pathway is gummed up processing alcohol, it inhibits the ability of the liver to do all of the other cool stuff it usually does. The second reason for this is because calories from alcohol are non-nutritive calories. They don't provide you with energy and nutrients and building blocks of life the way nourishing food calories do. Supposedly, Andre the Giant got an average of 7,000 calories a day from alcohol. Oh my gosh, that is so crazy and so bad if your goal is longevity. But wait, I thought we were talking about fructose today. Fructose is a non-nutritive calorie source that can almost only be processed by the liver. The liver has to use the enzyme ketohexokinase C to phosphorylate fructose to fructose 1-phosphate, which is then converted to glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and then is synthesized to triacylglycerols and very low-density lipoproteins. And just like with alcohol, while the liver is busy following these detox steps just the way it does with alcohol, it's not free to do the other cool stuff it usually does. And we're loading ourselves up on non-nutritive calories. Excess fructose is detoxified by a liver process called lipogenesis, or the generation of fat. This is what leads to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We talked about that in episode 115. But what even is fructose? Fructose is a 6-carbon sugar like glucose. Glucose gets a bit of a bad rap because we know we don't want high blood glucose levels, and we definitely will have fewer chronic diseases if we limit our glucose consumption and make sure our blood glucose levels don't go too high. But our bodies were designed to run on glucose. Yes, we can thrive on ketones, and there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate, but we're pretty much set up to run on glucose. In the right amounts, glucose is our friend. Fructose is not. There is no good amount of fructose that we want to get. Our body can detox us from small amounts of it, just like it can detox us from small amounts of alcohol, but it's not something we ever need or should seek out. Fructose is sweeter tasting than glucose, but it doesn't increase your blood sugar or trigger your body to release insulin the way glucose does. Do you remember when people were crazy about the glycemic index and would use agave syrup as a sweetener because it doesn't spike your blood sugar? Agave syrup is 80% fructose. That is really bad. If you have some in your pantry, burn it in a bonfire or throw it in the garbage can, whatever you got to do. Other than agave syrup, where might you be getting all this evil fructose from? Fruit has some fructose, hence the name. It's what helps it taste sweet. Your liver can easily handle detoxing the fructose in an apple or a plum. At my house, at the time I'm recording this, we are absolutely drowning in peaches and grapes from our backyard. So there's a lot of fructose going on in our family right now. Fruit juices are much more concentrated forms of fructose with no fiber, and they are not good for you. Table sugar is 50% fructose and 50% glucose. We call it sucrose, but that's what it really is, 50% fructose, 50% glucose. And high fructose corn syrup is 55% fructose and 45% glucose. Not that much more than table sugar, but a little bit. Nothing as bad as agave. The vast majority of packaged foods have sugar added to them, so every gram of sugar they sneak in there is half fructose and half glucose. And it is sneaked into so many foods and drinks, it would make your head spin. I know you've probably heard someone beating the sugar is evil drum before, and it is. But I hope that understanding a little bit more about the two sides of sugar, glucose and fructose, is helpful as you make daily little choices in your life. Too much glucose is also bad, and getting to a metabolic state where your insulin isn't unlocking your cells so that to let glucose come in as well as it used to is absolutely something that needs to be dealt with. And you can do it. You can reverse insulin resistance. I can help you. But fructose doesn't involve insulin or blood sugar at all, really. Well, there's more to it. Fructose is a dose-dependent chronic liver toxin. Hey, I wanted to briefly interrupt to ask if you're curious about female bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, the kind that's usually started around the time of perimenopause. What it is, what it does, how it works, what it's like. If so, you should check out my Udemy course called The Basics of Female Bioidentical Hormone Replacement Therapy. The course goes over the pros and cons of using hormone treatment, which hormones are usually included with BHRT, how they're used, the lab tests that are used, some tips for finding a prescriber in pharmacy to work with, and how to develop a rough estimate of how much BHRT will cost you. If you've been wondering whether bioidentical hormone replacement therapy is right for you, it's time to close that open loop, stop wondering, and move forward with confidence. Enroll in my course today. As a listener of the podcast, you can get a special discount for the very best price. It's a no-brainer. I would just tell you the coupon code, but Udemy makes me change it every month. So check the show notes or go to www.healthcouragecollective.com/Udemy to find the special podcast listener discount code that's only for awesome people like you. Okay, back to the episode. If I may read you a couple of paragraphs from an article in the International Journal of Molecular Sciences called Fructose and the Liver by Mi-Kyung Lee, hopefully this will help solidify your understanding of fructose. Fructose overconsumption may result in insulin resistance, oxidative stress, inflammation, elevated uric acid levels, increased blood pressure, and increased triglycerides in both the blood and the liver. Fructose is recognized as a major mediator of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, as a significant correlation between fructose intake and the degree of inflammation and fibrosis has been found in preclinical and clinical studies. Moreover, fructose is a risk factor for liver cancer development. Interestingly, fructose induces a number of pro-inflammatory, fibrogenic, and oncogenic signaling pathways that explain its deleterious effects on the body, especially the liver. Plenty of evidence indicates that fructose and its metabolites play a significant role in the development of liver disease. The multiple mechanisms that fructose triggers have placed it in the eye of the hurricane in the metabolic disorders of the liver. Basic research has illuminated some of the cellular and molecular mechanisms that are involved in the deleterious effects of the overconsumption of fructose, including oxidative stress, inflammation, higher serum uric acid levels, hypertriglyceridemia, high systolic blood pressure, insulin resistance, fibrosis, cirrhosis, and hepatocellular carcinoma. Fructose consumption plays pivotal roles in lipogenesis, inflammatory signaling pathways, fibrosis, cancer development, free radical overproduction, and uric acid overproduction. These observations may be used for the development of new drugs and therapies. However, more in-depth studies are required to find new therapeutic targets for drug development to prevent hepatic fibrosis." End quote. Phew, sorry that was kind of long, but I think it's really good for pointing out that your chances of getting liver disease, including liver cancer, are very much increased by the presence of this liver toxin called fructose. Also, the development of high triglycerides, high systolic blood pressure, inflammation, and high uric acid levels, which is what causes gout. Do you know what else increases your chances of getting liver disease, cirrhosis, liver cancer, high triglycerides, high blood pressure, inflammation, and high uric acid levels? Yeah, alcohol. So similar. I ended that quote from the journal article where I did on purpose because it's quintessentially the Western medicine mindset to me. Overconsumption of fructose causes all of these problems via all of these specific mechanisms. Knowing these mechanisms is only important to know because it might help us develop a new drug that works on one of these pathways to reduce liver fibrosis. The solution is so clear, and it's not the development of a drug. In Mi-Kyung Lee's defense, he or she did say at the end of the article, after all the stuff about the pathways to find developing new drugs, that the overconsumption of fructose, mainly in soft beverages, should be reduced worldwide. And of course, we do need to be able to treat people who are already suffering with liver and other health problems, but come on. Some other things fructose can do are increase a hormone called ghrelin. You might have heard of it before. It's your hunger hormone. So even though it has the same number of calories as glucose, fructose makes you hungrier rather than less hungry. I totally forgot until after I had finished writing this episode that Dr. Robert Lustig calls fructose the Voldemort of the dietary hit list. That is such a good way to remember it. Fructose also doesn't stimulate the hormone leptin as much as glucose, which is the satiety hormone. So fructose messes up your ability to feel less hungry when you consume it. You know what else has calories but doesn't really help you feel full? Yeah, alcohol. Eating a little bit of fructose from fruit is not too much for your liver to handle. Plus, the chewing and the presence of fiber and water and vitamins and minerals in the fruit help negate some of the dangers of fructose. I think that some of the best diet advice is to not eat things that your great-grandma didn't eat. You're pretty likely to avoid a whole lot of trouble by just following that little rule. My great-grandma, well, obviously, I have 4 of them, but the one I know the most about was named Josephine Breuer from Germany. It always reminds me of Paul Breuer from Young Frankenstein. Anyhow, she was my dad's mom's mom, and she was a really cool lady. I love hearing stories about her. Extremely hardworking and self-sufficient, and really did a lot with the tiny bit of independence women had back then. I'm pretty sure that she'd eat a lot of peaches and grapes from her backyard if they were there, but she definitely wouldn't be drinking soda, eating breakfast cereal, or snacking from packages, boxes, and bags, or getting her lunch from a drive-through window. In the early 1900s, the average American would eat about 15 grams of fructose a day. Today, the average American consumes about 75 grams a day of fructose. This is a major driver of the chronic diseases of aging that cause you to slowly stop living before you die. It's a little bit like we're all complacently living with the physical consequences of alcoholism. Not to downplay the psychological and social effects of alcoholism on a family, especially when combined with mental health issues, it can be devastating. But interestingly, while all of your body's tissues can metabolize and use glucose, the liver is almost the only place that can metabolize fructose. Almost. If you'll indulge me with a little more geeky science, I think this is super interesting. So in your brain, you have neurons and astrocytes. Astrocytes form a grid that's woven between the neurons that connects one astrocyte to thousands of synapses. Astrocytes eavesdrop on neurons and regulate their firing and their signals. Neurons, like almost all other cells in the body, can't metabolize fructose, but astrocytes can. Astrocytes turn fructose into glycogen because fructose gets in the way of an enzyme in the brain called glutamine synthetase. Glutamine synthetase makes the neurotransmitter glutamine, not surprisingly. Lots of neurotransmitters can convert back and forth to one another. Glutamine can convert both to glutamate and to GABA. Stick with me, we're almost done with this. So GABA is a very calming neurotransmitter. It reduces anxiety and it helps you relax, feel calm, and sleep well at night. Glutamate is a very excitatory neurotransmitter that increases anxiety, restlessness, and pain signals. We do need some glutamate, but too much causes discomfort, anxiety, abnormal behavior, irritability, trouble concentrating, and premature brain cell death. Okay, makes sense? And why should you care? Because when you have too much glutamate, it can be converted via glutamine synthetase to glutamine, which can be converted to GABA. So your brain and enzymes and everything else can effortlessly keep this perfect balance of anxiety-causing glutamate to zen-causing GABA. Unless, glutamine synthetase is inhibited by the presence of fructose. Fructose tips the balance to more glutamate and less GABA. This puts your brain at an unnecessary disadvantage, limiting your ability to access peaceful concentration, calm and rational thoughts, and deep concentration. Crazy, right? Would you purposefully take a substance that puts your brain at a disadvantage? Not to mention is a dose-dependent liver toxin. I think we all know that too much sugar is bad and we, quote, shouldn't have too much sugar, or that sugary treats are naughty or something, but I hope this helps you see that it's not just about having muffin top or your butt looking big, or even about the extremely important effects of having high blood sugar. Fructose prevents you from living the life that you want to live. The question then becomes, what do you want to do about it? File this information away in the amazing card catalog of your memory, or actually do something different in your actual life. It doesn't have to be anything big. I'm here to help you transition to getting 100% consistent following an intelligent plan to age with confidence. We've got this. Clearly, reducing your sucrose intake and high fructose corn syrup intake would be ideal. Getting back to your great-grandma's amount of fructose, 15 grams a day, would be awesome. What does that mean for you? An all-or-nothing mandate of 15 grams or die will probably not result in success for most people. Maybe just start with tracking what you eat, then start observing what your sugar intake is. Or maybe you already know what the one biggest source of sucrose or high fructose corn syrup in your life is. Can you cut it back by 25%? Maybe more? This is definitely not the highest leverage thing you can do, but have you heard of dextrose? Usually you just hear about it in IV fluids. I dispense IV dextrose solutions every day that I'm at work. Dextrose is glucose. I've done this in the past, which is not an optimal solution, but you can buy powdered dextrose in a tub. The one I had looked like a protein powder tub. Then you could choose to substitute dextrose for sucrose in what you prepare for yourself at home. You would still be getting glucose and carbs, but you would be getting a little bit less fructose. Will it make a huge difference? No, probably not. But I do think it's slightly better than using sucrose. The dextrose has a powdery consistency, a lot like the consistency of protein powder, and it's not as sweet as sucrose, so that affects its consistency, texture, taste, and browning ability. But it's an option. I use sucrose so rarely now that I didn't replace my dextrose when I ran out of it like 5 years ago, but still think about it sometimes. I mostly add sweetness in the form of monk fruit if I can. Reducing overall sugar consumption is definitely the way to go for longevity, especially if you drink your sugar in any way. Fruit juice, soda, smoothies, fancy coffee drinks, Kool-Aid. Remember Kool-Aid? I assume it still exists. Gatorade, cocktails. Please don't drink sugar or make it a very rare occurrence. The average amount of fructose we consume as a society has risen exponentially, and our bodies are only able to handle it as a toxin, like alcohol. We are on our way to consuming Andre the Giant-sized quantities of fructose. The problem is that we don't see it that way anymore. That freakishly large quantity has become, the average Thursday, which is one of the biggest reasons it has also become normal to slowly stop living before you die. Next week, we're going to talk about how allowing yourself to be bored, which is super rare these days, can make you better. Until then, remember the Voldemort of the dietary hit list, and don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult consult a licensed physician.